A very good evening, everyone. Welcome to lecture 14 of Professor H.D. Sankalia monthly lecture series on Jain heritage. Today, to talk about the topic Jain vestiges in and around Madurai and overview, we have with us Ms. Deepika Karunakar. Before I go on ahead with this particular introduction of the talk and of the speaker, let me briefly introduce you all to Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology at Deccan College. This particular chair has been established with the fund from International School for Jain Studies, a division of Amar Prerna Trust, and Vardhaman Charitable Foundation, USA. The aim of this chair is to disseminate information, awareness, and all the other things related to Jain studies so that there is a lot much awareness about this particular field of studies. The chair also has multiple activities in the form of national seminars, national workshops, projects, site-specific documentations, certificate course in Jain art and archaeology, intercollegiate quiz, and many other things. The name of this series has been dedicated to Professor H.D. Sankalia, the establisher of the Department of Archaeology at Deccan College, for his contributions to the field of archaeology and specifically for the decipherment and publishing of the inscription from Pale, which pushes back the early date of Jainism in the region of Western Deccan to 2nd century to 1st century BCE. So now I take this moment to introduce our today's speaker, Mrs. Deepika Karunakar. Mrs. Deepika Karunakar is a master's degree holder in AIHC and archaeology from Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, Pune. She is a heritage freelancer engaged in creating heritage-based experiential learning among school students through field visits, engaging talks, interactive sessions, and hands-on experience. We are very happy to have you here with us, Deepika, and I kindly request you now to begin your session.
Thank you so much, Ocean, for the introduction. Hearty good evening to one and all gathered over here. I take immense pleasure to be in front of you and talk on this topic, which is very close to my heart. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to my alma mater, Deccan College, and my heartfelt thanks to the Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology. They have been doing a very wonderful job on disseminating the knowledge on Jain archaeology, history, which is really important, and it's not only centric to one region. All these talks focuses on the Jain spread throughout India, which is really essential to be reached among the masses. So they have been doing a very lovely job, and I feel really happy to be a part of this lecture series. Coming to Madurai, everyone would be knowing about the city. Madurai is really famous and it's synonymous to the temple of Meenakshi Amman temple. The very moment when we think about Madurai, anyone, be it an Indian or from outsider, Meenakshi temple just strikes their mind. But other than the temples, we do have numerous Jain vestiges which is centered in and around the city, which is like really an interesting thing to be witnessed, to be experienced, which not even the localites know much about it. So to reach out about these places, the lecture like these plays a very pivotal role. That's when everyone would get to know about such heritage that we have, to say they are hidden treasures. Like every nook and corner of a country possesses all these heritage. So in Madurai we have numerous Jain vestiges, which dates back to 3rd century BC, and Jainism religion itself flourished from the 3rd century BC till the 13th century, which is like a super long duration. So definitely the vestiges pertaining to the religious tradition would also be plenty, and these places where the Jain sites are located are a very lovely location because they're such a calm spot. So it's really a lovely spot for history enthusiast, archaeology engaged person, heritage appreciation person. For them, it's really subject oriented. These are lovely sites, and at the same moment, someone who is a fitness freak, it's also ideal for them because every site here offers a good hike, and also someone who's interested in photography, who appreciates nature. So every individual would appreciate nature, so going to that particular spot we would relish it more. So such a lovely view that those spots offer us. So it's a blend of so many lovely things. And without further delay, I would like to start off with the session. Let me share my screen. Hope my screen is visible.
Yes, the screen is visible, but there is no PPT.
Oh, okay. Let me try doing it again. Is it visible now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, the picture collage that I have on my left side are the sites that are located in and around the city of Madurai. So we do have the rock beds, we do have Tamil Brahmi inscriptions, and a lot of sculptures of Teethankaras being beautifully carved in these hillocks. So we'll be seeing through the major sites that we have, and before going on to the localities that are centric in the city, we'll be going through a little bit about the religion of Jainism, how it came to Madurai, how it spread in the southern part of India, and some literature which gives references to this religion, and some descriptions in the literature. And also, we'll be seeing an overview of the sites that we have and a little bit detailed description about the places, accompanied by numerous photos. And the picture on the right side is a loose image of Tirthankara. So over here in Madurai, it's really hard to identify which particular Tirthankara the idols belong to or the sculpture belong to, because we generally don't have the lanchanas or the emblems that gets associated with each Tirthankara. So identifying Mahavira becomes easier, but identifying the other sculptures becomes little difficult. So we generally categorize them as Tirthankara. So this loose sculpture, we find it in a place called Muttupatti, which is located near university that we have called the Madurai Kamaraj University. Close to it is this Muttupatti site. Earlier, the sculpture was in its full form without any demolition in its full glory, but unfortunately, over the years, it has faced the vandalism and a small portion of it is broken. So, that's one serious threat and issue these sites are facing, and we'll be discussing further about it. To start off with the religion, like before starting the whole session, it's our responsibility to know about the religion, to have a quick glance about it. So the religion of Jainism, the date which we can ascertain to it is 6th century BC. So a major purpose that paved way for the emergence of Jainism is the growing influence of the Vedic tradition that we have been having in our nation. So it was around the 6th century BC when the influence started getting more and more due to the supremacy of the Brahmanic tradition, because the Vedic tradition was so much dependent on rituals and a lot of other traditions and practices, which was like uh, a very difficult thing to follow. And it had a lot of customs and traditions attached to it. So, this elaborate emphasis on rituals, practices, and a lot of other customs and things, uh, it paved way for the emergence of religions like Jainism and Buddhism. So, as a part of it, nearly 62 religious sects emerged on the banks of River Ganga. So, the two major religious groups that we know are the Jainism, Buddhism, and also the Ajivikas. Other than that, there is numerous other religious groups that came, but over the years we don't have an evidence or don't have a, knowledge about it. But these three have been surviving over the times. Jainism has been flourishing throughout our country. In India, it's very strong. Buddhism, we don't find it much happening in the country, but it has crossed across the ocean and it's very flourishing at an international level. And the other one, Ajivikas, founded by Makaliputta Gosala, we have few remnants of it, so not much is there to explore as related to Ajivikas. So Mahavira, who is the founder of Jainism, so he is the 24th Tirthankara, the 24th Jain seer or the monk related to the religious belief. Before him, we had 23 Tirthankaras. So Tirthankara is generally monk who helps us to get over this mundane life, who helps us to get over this societal life and helps us to attain liberation and salvation. So they have paved the way for the Jain ideology, and they've established the ideas, the principles of the entire religion. And the features if we see of Jainism and why it stands out from the Vedic tradition is that because of its simple teachings. So the whole religion believes on a very minimalistic living, the non-violence, all these values and virtues, and a very simple practices it preaches. And also, if you see the whole ideology, it's very simple and lucid for the individuals to follow. So that's the main necessity in a religion. It has to be very approachable. It has to be amicable. So that's the essential part, and this religious practices have given the space and given the comfort and given the ease. So that makes the religion stand out from the Vedic tradition, from the Brahmanic tradition. As I mentioned, it was made accessible to all. So, because all the teachings were preached in the language of the people, and all the people, irrespective of their background, were included. It was inclusive, and certain concepts like ahimsa, non-violence, which was like easy for the people to relate and to accept. So, these ideology, these principles, uh, uh, and the space that it gave really helped in reaching out the religion among the masses. And over the years, the tradition also gave the space for women. So, as I mentioned, this whole religious belief is is constituted by the 24 Tirthankaras. All the 24 monks have played a very major role in establishing the religion. So, among them, the most prominent is Vardhamana Mahavira, who is believed to be the founder of the religion and gave a great impetus to the religion. And it was during his time it was institutionalized. So, it is the 24th Tirthankara Mahavira, and before him, the 23rd Tirthankara Parshvanatha are considered the historical characters. And it was in the first century CE. So this religion emerged on the banks of river Ganga in the 6th century BC. It was after a long duration in about first century CE we can find the divisions that come in the religious fold. It is quite natural that over the years, over a long duration, over the travel of the religious ideology, it is quite common for it to have some divisions based on the ideology. So similarly, in the first century, we can find the twofold division that emerges in the Jainism. So one is the Digambaras and one is the Shvetambaras. So Digambaras, a little translation is sky clad. So Dik means the direction and Ambaran means the dress. So they are the people who believe that the directions having the old direction as their wardrobe. So Shvetambaras generally are seen with a white robe. So they always are clad by the white robe. Digambaras are found naked. So this is the prime division that happens in the religious belief in and around the first century CE. So after the death of Mahavira, we can find his ideology and principles being moved forward by his disciples. So in such a way, it was through the efforts of his disciples it has reached the length and breadth of the country. So among them is one major monk by the name Bhadrabahu. So, this oral tradition, this legend is generally attached to the emergence of and the spread of religion towards the southern India. So, over now we have been seeing its growth, its emergence in the Gangetic Valley. So, over the years after the first century CE, it's when it started its journey towards the southern part. So, for this journey, this legend is always narrated, this is always associated with it. So, it's a monk by the name Bhadrabahu who is believed to be the religious guru of the king Chandragupta Maurya, who was ruling over the Mauryan dynasty. So the Mauryan dynasty is the most known ruling dynasty which ruled over in the current Bihar region. So Chandragupta Maurya is a very known character in that religious, in this dynasty. So it is this monk who had foretold a famine that was about to happen in the region. So in his dream, he saw that a famine would occur for a long duration. So it was under his advice the entire kingdom started moving towards the south. So it was thought that the movement is a wise decision. So this long exodus happened, and that's when it's further moved towards the south is seen, and then far south it came. So this tradition, this whole legend is passed on orally generation after generation. And as I mentioned, an acute famine was foretold and they all moved towards the south and they halted at this place of Shravanabelagola, which is located in current day Karnataka. So Shravanabelagola is considered the Mula Sangha. So it's the main organization for Jains in the southern region. So over there, the entire group halted, but one more division under the leadership of Visakacharya continued this movement further south. So it was under the leadership of Vishakacharya, the travel continued, and one group of Jains came further down, further south. And that's when the entry of them is seen towards the Tamil regions. So the tentative date that is given for this emergence and for the entry of the Jains in the Tamil lands it's about 3rd century BCE, which is about 2600 to 2700 years before the religion is said to have entered the Tamil lands. And it is believed that it was mostly the Digambaras who came here. So over the years, the Shvetambaras started coming. So initially, it was the Digambaras who entered the region. So now the question comes like, why Madurai? Why we have Madurai being chosen as an ideal location? One thing is this whole city is surrounded by numerous hillocks, and these hillocks are blessed with natural caverns, a very suitable location for them to reside, for them to do their penance, for them to spread the religious ideology, and to help the masses and the people who live here. So ideal natural landscape because it's really wonderful views that we get from these sites, and you can understand it further when we come in person and witness it. So that's what it is. And these natural cabins and the hillocks falls on the trade route. So these trade routes connects from the northern part to the southern part. From the Uttarapat to the Dakshinapat, it connected all the trade routes. So that's the reason we had a lot of traders who were coming along the way, also helped in the spread of the religion further. They helped the monks, they helped, gave a lot of comfort to the monks who stayed in the natural caves. And the very basic thing that we would generally see when we are about to settle in a place is the prevalence or the availability of water. So we all know water is the elixir of life. In all the Jain spots that we have the natural springs over there. Close by, we have the natural springs. The entire place around would be dry. The whole city itself will be running out of water. But these natural springs are a perennial source of water all around the year, be it hot season, cold season, winter, rainy. The water is ever prevalent there. So this becomes an ideal factor for residing there. And as I mentioned, these falls on the trade route, and also um, these monks found the caves and these hillocks as ideal because it kept them close to the city but also away from the city. So they have to stay close to the city because they have to preach the people, they have to reach out to the masses, and for the food. And for the food, they have to go to the villages, to the settlements nearby. So for all these reasons, staying close to the city or a village is essential. So staying away is also necessary because they have to introspect, they have to engage in meditation, they have to be in silence. So this spot was very ideal for them, and that was a huge blessing for them as well. And as I mentioned, all the traders who came along the way, were of great help because they offered some help and comfort for them. We'll be seeing in short like what are these contributions that they made, and we get to know that it was few individuals who made this through the help of the inscriptions that we have. So these inscription goes back to 3rd century BC. So 3rd century BC to 3rd century CE is categorized as the Sangam period in the region of Tamil, in the Tamil lands. So it was during this period we have a lot of Tamil Brahmi inscriptions over here, and it, in short, it gives the details of name of the individual, what help he made. There might be emphasis on the title he has, and sometimes from the region where he comes from. So mostly in the one liner we get to find all these information. So it is around 15 such locations we have in and around Madurai, which easily goes back to 2500 years before. And if you see the spread of the Jain vestiges that we have around the city, it goes up to 40 kilometer. So that huge spread we have for the Jain vestiges. And we have it scattered all around the city in all the four directions we do have. So when it comes to the Jain sites, it's very hard to have one particular guidelines or a rule for choosing the location because they were living with the nature. So it's very hard to fix it within a rule. So they don't have any guidelines. Natural spot which was ideal for them was chosen, and these were like modified over the period by the traders, by the officials, by the localites who were living there as a part of some small help for the monks that they did. So it was modified a little comfort, and it was ensured that all these caves, and it is quite natural for it to be supplied with ample sunlight because it's literally facing the sun, and it's merged with the nature, so there is no shortfall for the light for the sun rays. So that is there, and it was also ensured, and it was necessary to have a shelter for them during the monsoon. So it was during the monsoon, which is mentioned as the Chatur Mas, the 4 months of rainfall is when they would be residing in these caves. But the rest of the months they would engage in movement and reaching out about the religion and helping out the masses. So the rest of the time during the monsoon, they would confine themselves to these particular places. And I did mention all these hillocks and all these chain spots mostly falls on the trade route. And I mentioned a few examples, and almost all the sites fall on the major trade route. And food, as I mentioned, was an important part. So once it's available, that was also a factor which they considered. So if we see the Jains who were living here back 2500 years before, we had the Jain monks as one group and the Jain householders who are called the Shravakas. So without Shravakas, the monks are not there, and the monks play a major role in disseminating the knowledge to the Shravakas. And the Jain monks focused on the four donations. One is the food. So even though they went out, reached out for the food, they ensured that the food was also given to the people who came in search of them. So this Annadana was also focused knowledge. So the knowledge and the education was also ensured that it was reached among the people, because in few sites like Kila Kuilkudi, Samanar Malai, and also the Mangulam, and also one more site which is away from the city called Kurandi. These places are known for having an education institution during the thriving time of the Jainism that we had in Madurai, and a lot of contact was also had with the Shravana Belagula. We had a lot of monks coming from there to Madurai, and the monks from here had also gone there. So the schools flourished a lot, and the knowledge was disseminated. So it's called the Palli. The school or the education center was called Palli. It was addressed as Palli, and even today in Tamil, the schools are mentioned as Palli. So the same word is carried forward. And one more offer or a donation that they did was the shelter. The people who came in search of some shade, shelter, some comfort, they came here, and they were given that comfort by the monks who were staying there, and the medicine. In sites like Yane Malay, and also in Keela Valavu, we have some stone grinders, which is paved on the surface of the rock. Some small holes are there, and possibly these were used for the medicines, is what scholars believe, to grind the medicine. So people who came with mental sickness, physical ailments were given the shelter there. So all these things were ensured, it was provided to the people by the monks. And one more beautiful aspect about the Jains who stayed here in the city is that they got along with the people. It was not just about their physical presence. One can easily connect with the people when they learn their language, when they learn their tongue, when they communicate in the language of the people where they stay. So that's what they did. To reach out to the people, they ensured that they learned the language. So the Jains who came here were not the Tamil speaking people, but they came, once they settled, they learned the Tamil language, and they did not stop there. They started composing a lot of literary and literature and grammatical works. So Tirukkural is the most known basic work on Tamil grammar. So that's the foundation work on the Tamil grammar. So the composer Tiruvalluvar is believed by few scholars as the Jain. So this shows that they consider the language as a very important element. They learned the language and helped in spreading the religion further. So the Tirukkural, if you see, it focuses a lot on the values, the virtues, the right way of living, the righteous living, and it focuses on a minimalistic living, and it focuses on non-violence. When we see all these aspects, it really helps us to think that it focuses, the whole focus is similar to how the Jain ideology is. So that's the reason scholars believe that it should be written by Tiruvalluvar, who himself could be a Jain. And as I mentioned, we have the centers of education in few Jain sites like Ilakwil, Kurandi, Mangulam, and the themes that is focused, and the values and the virtues that is in the religion is all about vegetarianism, minimalistic living, and a very dharmic right way of living is integral part of the Jain Dharma. So during this period, I mentioned this duration of 300 BC to 300 CE. So 300 BC is considered to be the time when the Jain religion entered the Tamil lands. So this duration, we find the vestiges that I've mentioned in the pictures over here. One is the stone beds. So any Jain site that falls within this time bracket, the main thing that we find there are these beds. So I did mention earlier that it was the wealthy traders, the people over here, who created the small comfort to the monks who stayed within the shelters. So the stone beds are nothing but a properly chiseled, well chiseled, and very softened surface of rock. So it's, if we can see the small divisions like a bed being made and a small elevation on the top to serve as a pillow. So we can find numerous rock beds in all these sites. And the other thing is a drip ledge. The second photo I mentioned the drip ledge. So the drip ledge is this a complete cut that the rock surface has. So over here in the picture, we can find the whole boulder, the whole stone has been cut into two halves. So this half is a man-made feature. It's not a natural, and this drip ledge is made so that the rainwater does not enter the cave, because they mostly stay during the monsoon time, and the very major threat is the entry of the rainwater into the shelter. So to avoid that, the drip ledge is made. So this helps in moving the water on the either sides without allowing it to enter inside the shelter. So if at all the water enters inside, small channels were cut on the rock surface, on the surface of the rock, and through those channels it goes and it drains outside. So this drip ledge was another feature. And the third picture that we have are the Tamil Brahmi inscriptions. So on the rock surface behind, we can find the letters of Tamil Brahmi. So Tamil Brahmi is the old font or old script for the Tamil language. So over the years, this started turning into rounded form. So that came to be addressed as Vattelithu. And then we had Grantha. So all these scripts were used to write the Tamil language. Tamil Brahmi is the oldest, followed by Vattaluthu. Then we had Grantha. Then we had the movement towards modern Tamil. So the Tamil that we have as this long evolution. So the vestiges that we have within this time period are the stone beds, a drip pledge, and the Tamil Brahmi inscriptions. These are what we find. So it was during the later period, it was from the 8th century CE is when we started having the sculptures. So before that, there were none of the sculptures of Tirthankaras made because it was in the tradition of the Tamil region and also in the Jain tradition, there was no idol worship back then. It was from the later period we started having the sculptures and the idols made. So before that, it was devoid of any sculptures. So after the 3rd century CE, after the Sangam period comes a stage of Kalabra. So this Kalabra, for a long time, it was mentioned as a dark age. So it was called a dark age because the Moovendar, whom we consider the three dynasties, the Chola, Chera, Pandya, they weren't a very flourishing political groups then. So they were just minimized to a normal chieftains. The whole power was reduced. It was for this 200, I mean the 300 years, the 250 CE to the 550 CE, their entire power was brought down. They were mere chieftains. We don't get to know much about the activities, the political scenario, the architectural contributions, or about the literature. It's a very dull period, and that's the reason it was categorized as a dark age. But over the years, it was told that the scholars mentioned that a group from the Karnataka, a political group from the Karnataka, rulers from that region had come towards the Tamil region, established a rule over there, over here. So that was the whole political upheaval that happened, and we all know the rulers who were centered in Karnataka were inclined towards Jainism, and that was a major reason. After 3rd century CE, the religion flourished further. So this religion continued to be a major religion. The Jainism was thriving here because of the support of the rulers who came from the region of Karnataka. And also to attest the fact, we know there is a literature. It's a Tamil literary work. It's a religious work called Periya Puranam, which was composed in 12th century CE. So Periya Puranam, it's actually a work on all the 63 main saints centered in Shaivism. So we call them as Aruvati Moonu Nayanmar, the 63 Nayanmars. So these Nayanmars are the saints, prominent saints who were engaged in the worship of Shiva. And each Puranam was about the each Nayanar. So Murti Nayanar is one among the 63 uh, monks, 63 saints. He was one among that, and in his chapter, in his Puranam, it's mentioned that the Vendar in Tamil means the king from the region of Karnataka, along with the Arhar, who are the Jains. So Arhar is a term that's used here for the Jains. So along with them, they halted the Shaiva activity. The Shaiva religious activities were halted, is what he mentions. So this happening, this Kalabra period is a very it's a very old duration because it goes to 5th century CE. But this chapter, this Puranam, goes back to the 12th century CE. So it's a after a very long duration, we have a reference in the literature. Following that is the Bhakti tradition. It is throughout the country the Bhakti movement happened. So this Bhakti movement is all about simplifying the religion. So back then, as we saw in the 6th century BC, how rituals were emphasized, how a lot of practices was emphasized during the Bhakti movement. A lot of simpler, very simple approach was focused upon. Like you can just chant the name of the god. You can approach the god through music. You can approach the god through simple practices, which is like possible to your extent. So that's how the Bhakti movement was focused on. And this period goes to the 7th century CE. But it was during this period we can notice a small drift happening between the Jains and the Shaivites over here. Till the Calabra period, till the 6th century, things were fine, and it was during the Bhakti movement a small upheaval happened. It was during the time of Bhakti movement, a lot of Shaivites, the 63 Nayanmars whom I mentioned right now, they travel throughout the Chola region. So Chola region generally falls in current day Trichy, Tanjavur, Pudukkottai, all these sites, all these modern districts forms the Chola region. So these Nayanmars travel throughout the Chola region, visited multiple temples, and also sung about the god here. So that's how they spread the religious beliefs. So the constant religious activity was happening, a religious awareness was happening. And also, not just that, they came to certain places where the Jainism was also flourishing, similar to Madurai. So we had the Jains thriving here, and at the same time, we had these Nayanmars traveling to this long region, coming here, visiting the temple, and spreading the glory of the god. So one instance is uh, one of the Nayanmar by the name Tirunavukarasar, who was en route to Palayare. Palayare is close to Tanjavur, so when he was on his route to Palayare, he got to know that in one particular Shiva temple. So it was from the 8th century CE we started having the tradition of temples made out of rock. Before that, mostly they were made out of brick, burnt clay, all these were only used. The burnt bricks were only used. So we don't have any evidence of stone temples before that or the usage of stone in the religious activity. So in this particular temple, he heard from the people that it was occupied by the Jains and they were refusing the entry to the devotees. So this very clearly shows that that particular region was occupied by the Jains. So nowhere it's mentioned that they caused any harm to the people. It was just that the a little Shaivism activities was stopped and there was a Jain influence over there. So this much was only mentioned and we never get any evidence of any harm or any disturbance or any physical activities happening over there. So this is the only thing. And one more instance is Trinyana Sambandar. So Trinyana Sambandar is also one among the 63 Nayanmars who visited Madurai during the 7th century CE. In fact, he was called here for the re-establishment of Shaivism in the Madurai region. And I'll be mentioning about it shortly. So when he came here, he himself noticed that there was a severe influence of Jainism in a place called Yane Malay. It's one particular hillock close to the city. So over there, a lot of Jain activities was happening. So he never feared to enter here where there was a lot of Jain activities happening. So this period of 7th century was a small setback in the religion. So this is the whole story of Tirunyana Sambandar coming to the city of Madurai, and so this person who is seated on the extreme right under a small canopy is Trinyana Sambandar. He is in fact a very small boy and he comes under the 63 Nayanmars. So we had a king by the name Koon Pandian and he was also called the Nindrasir Nedimaran. Koon in Tamil means a hunch. So this king had a hunchback. So Nindrasir Nedimaran he was called after his hunch was set right when he stood upright. So that happened. Will we see how that happened to him? So his wife was Mangir Karasi. The king Koon Pandian had converted himself to a Jain. So in Tamil we always have this one phrase, Raja Evvali Makkal Avvali. So the king who follows one particular religion, similarly the people would follow the same religion. So the what to say the political following of a religion becomes the religion of all the people, all the masses also. So because of that, people had to convert themselves to Jainism. But Mangiya Karasi, who comes from the Chola region, so the Chola region is known for Shaivism. It's a very strong hold of Shaivism. So she, along with her minister Kulachariyar, wanted to bring back the Shaivism in this land, in the Pandya region. So they got the help of Tiranyana Sambandar, who was a very small boy who was brought here. So when he came here, he found that so we can find all these people who are bringing him here. So he's brought in a palanquin. to Madurai, to the city of Madurai. So when he came here, the king was suffering from severe fever, a weapon. He was suffering from that fever. So the Jains also came. They tried their level best to recover him, but they couldn't. So when Tirunjana Samandar came, he cured the fever with the help of a holy ash, Tirunir, we call it in Tamil, by singing some praises on Lord Shiva. Along with it, he gave the Tirunir and the king recovered. So after this magic created by Tirunjana Samandar with the help of the Tirunir, the king is said to have got back to his usual religion of Shaivism. He had heard to the Shaivism. So he is brought here. We can find the king, Queen Mangair Karasi in the middle, and we have the Jains on the extreme left. So, and in the center, we have the king Kun Pandian. So, this whole miracle is being witnessed. And after this, the Jains challenged Tirunjana Samandar to a contest. So these two contests are called the Analvadam and the Punalvadam. So Analvadam is a contest with the help of a fire. So over here it was told that the manuscripts with the verses written by the Jains and also the manuscript written by Tirunjana Samandar praising Lord Shiva, both would be put in the fire, and whichever is not burnt is considered to be the winning manuscript, and which gets burned is considered the defeat. So they did put the manuscripts were put, and the work of Tirunjana Samandar shone more brightly than before. The other works were burnt down. So this is Analvadam. So after this, so we can find the minister bringing this manuscript in front of the king and showing it to him, which the unburnt manuscript. And later, still, the defeat was not considered, and the Punalvadam happened. So over here, it was told that both the works would be put in the water. So which goes along with the flow is considered winning, and which goes against the currents is considered the defeating work. So again, the works of Tirunjana Samandar went along with the current, moved along with the water, and reached this place called Thiruvedagam, which is about 15 kilometers from here. So it's actually called Thiru Edagam. Edagam means the manuscript. Eda in Tamil means the manuscript, the place where the holy manuscript reached. Over the time, it started to be mentioned as Thiruvedagam. So just colloquially, it changed. So this is the temple. On the other side, we have a small depiction. So the panel over here, we can find this extreme shows the manuscript, and this is the banks of river Vaigai. But unfortunately now not much water flows here because it's a seasonal river. So this is how the works reached there and got merged with the god, is what this traditional story tells. So after this, the king, as I mentioned, he converted himself to Shaivism, and then his hunch was also set right, and he stood upright. So that's why he was called Indrasid Nedimaran. So this, again, this story is narrated all the time. And after this whole happening, the defeating party is said to have been impalated. So this is a small, it's a punishment. It's kind of a conclusion that was brought, and it's, we don't have again any evidence in the literature, and all these paintings goes back to the later period, and all the literature which mentions about this is of a very late period. So we don't have we can't bring it to a conclusion that this did happen in real, but it is just a mere narration. So it's mentioned that the Jains who were defeated were punished by placing them on a very sharp device, and they were split into two. So this is just the evidence that we get in few paintings, but it did not happen for real, and it's, as usual, it's a legend or a narration that's being passed on orally. So these paintings, we find it in the Narumbanatha temple located in Tiruvadai Marudur, which is about 200 kilometers from the city of Madurai. And we have these paintings found in the Gopuram, in the northern, in the western wall on the northern side of the Gopuram. And it goes back to the 17th century. So as I mentioned, all these paintings are of very late period. And we don't have any historical evidence either in the literature or on the copper plates or as a depiction which goes back before that. It's in a very late period we get to find them. And after the 7th century, after a small setback for the Jains, they started moving a little inward, little towards the village, because it was a very big strike on their prevalence. So that's why they had to go back into a little inward. That's how they went. And the very first evidence of this impalement, we can find it in the 11th century CE by Nambiyandar Nambi. So, in his work is the very first time we get to find the reference to this, which is like very late period. So even today during the Chitrai Tiruvalla, so Chitrai Tiruvalla is a very major festival that happens in the month of Chitra. Chitra is the Chaitra month that is known in the north, so it falls in the April and May. So this whole festival spans for almost 2 weeks, and during the day 6, this recital of the Saiva Samaya Stapita Varalatra Leela happens. So the narration of the re-establishment of Shaivism is seen. So the second picture over here, he is the priest or the Oduvar who narrates the entire story of what I mentioned a while ago. So this is Tirunjana Sambandar who is seated next to the king. He's curing him, and these are the Jains, and this is the Queen Mangair Karasi, and this is the Minister Kulacharya. So he's seen recovering the king, and this whole narration is made even today during the day 6 festival. So after the festival, like all the 63 Nayanmars, so all these are the metal images of the 63 saints, 63 Shaiva saints. It's brought here, and the Oduvar narrates the entire story, and these are the who stands on an higher elevation are the Queen Mangair Karasi and King Kum Pandian. So they both also come under the category of the 63 Nayanmars, and this is Tirunjana Sambandar. So they all participate in this narration. They hear the whole narration, and then the sculptures and all these metal images are taken around the city. Then, from the 7th century, the very next century that follows, 8th century, it's the phase of rejuvenation for the entire religion. So, after the Bhakti movement, the entire Jainism rejuvenated in the Tamil lands. The major reason for was the matrimonial relationship that happened between the Pandyas and the Gangas. The Gangas are the ruling dynasty in the Karnataka. So Gangas of Talakkad, they both had the matrimonial connection, so that really helped for the re-emergence of the religion. And also we have one reference of Varaguna Pandian, who was a early Pandya ruler who was married to the Ganga princess Kusundari. So all these matrimonial connections help a lot. And we had a saint by the name Achanandi. So this saint is said to have traveled to the entire length and breadth of Tamil Nadu. So what did he do? He again spread the religious belief. He spread the Jain Dharma among the masses, and also he carved a lot of sculptures on the rock surface. So we find a lot of sculptures made by Achanandi in and around Madurai, and also numerous other places in Tamil Nadu. So we get to know that these sculptures were made by Achanandi because below the sculpture he has engraved his name, Achanandi Sayal. That's how it's found, the work of Achanandi, which means the work of Achanandi in Vatteluthu. So I did mention in the Tamil language, the very starting script is Tamil Brahmi, followed by Vatteluthu. Vattam means round, a circular. So it became more circular, so it's called the Vatteluthu. So in Vatteluthu, we find this mention of Achanandi Sayal. So that's why we get to know that okay, Achanandi was a reformer who again brought back a life to the religion, and this went on till the 13th century, and then it went into oblivion. So Amanargal is the term that we have in the literature for the Jains. Amanar means someone who is naked. So even today, to mention someone like to mention a child, ammanama irukku, like to tell them if the child is naked. So ammanam is a word it's been used till today, and that's the term we have it for the Jains. So Madurai Kanchi is one of the work of late century, like around 4th century CE. It was a post Sangam literary work. It mentions about the Jain monks who were in this region, and it also mentions that the Jains were aware of all the three times. They knew about the past, present, and the future, and they were also aware of the heavenly and the earthly world because of the divine knowledge that they possessed. And they are known for practicing virtuous principles, and they were always engaged in fasting. So this concept of nomba is the Tamil word that we use for fasting, comes from the Jain tradition. That's been followed till today. This really gave them the virtuous principles that they follow, and also the fasting made them active and kept them energetic, and which never made them tired so easily. And it's also mentioned in the Madurai Kanchi that they possessed all the knowledge. Despite having so much of knowledge, they remain so calm and composed. So that's how it's a message for the people of current generation. So we all also have to follow the same ideology and the principle like how the Jains were. So it's a reminder for us. And they roamed around the places using a kamandalam. Kamandalam is a small pot with a spout. It's a water pot. So they carried it with them, and also they are said to have worshipped. These Jain monks were worshipped by the Shravakas, whom I mentioned as the householders. So there were some group of Jains who were householders. So they worshipped these monks using fragrant flowers and incenses. So this Madurai Kanchi of 4th century CE, and this particular work, Madurai Kanchi, very elaborately mentions about the city of Madurai. I'm sorry. So this Madurai Kanchi goes back to the 2nd century BC. So it's a much earlier work. It's of a Sangam period. I'm so sorry for this. It very clearly mentions about the Jains and the characteristics, and it's also a work which elaborately speaks about the city of Madurai. And other than that, Natrinai is one of the works, Tamil literary works, which mentions the Jains as Kunnurai Tavasi. Kundru means mountain or hill in Tamil, and they are seen with long locks and being naked. And Agnanuru, yet another Tamil work, mentions that the monks always had a dull look because of the constant fasting and also the bakeless bodies that they have. And they traveled throughout the hills and through the paths of the hills like an elephant herd. It shows that they stayed in groups. So that's what it indicates. And this certain terms, like I mentioned before, Unna Nomba is the word we use still today for the fasting, and Nirada the Mani are some of the terms that's used to describe the Jain monks in the literature. So, following that, even in Silapatikaram, which is post Sangam period work, speaks about the Jains. So, the protagonist of the Silapatikaram is Kovalan and Kannadi. So, they are the protagonists. So, when they were coming from the Chola region, so the whole Silapatikaram is set in the Chola region. So, in the region of Tanjavur, around that place. So from there, Kannagi and Kovalan were traveling towards the Pandya region, and they were helped by the Kavundi. Kavundi is Jain nun herself. So she also accompanied them in this long journey from the Chola lands to the Pandya lands. And she was speaking to them about how Jain monks who were staying in this region had a very great knowledge, and she even shared with them that she had a lot of eagerness to listen to their teachings and listen to their knowledge. So this very clearly shows that the author Ilango Adigal had a very clear knowledge and a very clear idea that Jainism was thriving in the Pandya region, and he has set the theme in such a way. So after this, in the later period, we get to find this one concept called the In Perum Gundram. In means eight, Perum means great, and Kundram means hill. The eight major hills, the eight main hills. So I've been mentioning that we have numerous sites, around 15 locations we have in and around Madurai pertaining to Jainism. So it is the 11th century work Ya Perum Kala Virutti, and the 12th century work Takkayattu Parani gives a glimpse on the eight major hills around Madurai. So it emphasizes the eight sites that were considered very, very sacred for the Jains. So among the eight hills, we are able to identify easily with the four hills. With the current hills, we are able to associate. But the rest of the other places that's mentioned in this category, it's very hard to find the current equivalent. So the very first hill that comes up in the verse is Parankundram. So Parankundram, even today, we have in the same name, but with a little modification called the Thiruparangundram. So we have the equivalent. So Thiruparangundram, it's a hotspot for Jainism, Shaivism, and Islam. So all the religious beliefs flourish there till today. Another place is Uruvagam. So Uruvagam is equated to the Jain hill that's on the west of the city, which is on the way to the university that I mentioned. So that's equated to that particular hill that we have. Yane Malai, it's even today called the Ane Malai or the Yane Malai in the same name, located on the northern side of the city. Irungundram. So Irungundram is equated to the Alagar Malay that we have today. So all these four hills we have the current equivalents. So the other one is Palli. The other place located, I mean mentioned in the verse is Palli. So I did mention before that Palli. So when the term Palli comes, it's none other than the Kurandi, the center of learning located in Kurandi. So, like how when we mention the temple for Vishnu, immediately Tirupati strikes us. Similarly, when a Palli is mentioned in Jain context, it is the Kurandi Palli, the Kurandi center of learning. So that's the one. And the other places, Arungundram, Perande Malai, Papparam, mentioned in the verse, till today, a satisfactory equivalent has not been drawn. So these three still remain confusion. So it is after the 7th century, a lot of new sites are also evolved. New sites in the sense we don't have the earlier remains of the rock beds or a drip ledge or the Tamil Brahmi inscription. In these sites, we get to find the sculptures. We get to find only the sculptures like Kuppalnattam, Puttur Malai, Uttamapalayam, all these places started thriving after the 7th century. But there are numerous sites which has its uh, stronghold right from the 3rd century BCE. So we have total of 17 centers and a lot of works like Periya Puranam, which mentions about the presence of Jains, lot of Jains. It's not just one or two Jains. It mentions the kind of adjective or simile or a metaphor of thousands of Jains. It's mentioned in Tamil as Ennayiram Samanarkal, 8,000 Jains. We don't have an evidence whether these many Jains stayed here, but that's how the literature elaborates, like in Nairam Samanarkal. And also a lot of other works of later period also gives a very clear reference about the in Perumgundram, the 8 major hills, and the Jains who resided here. So, as I mentioned, over here in the city of Madurai, it's a place where we have all the religious beliefs living along together even today. We have Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Shaktism, and the Jains, Islams, Christians. All of them have been living here. And the beauty of the city of Madurai, it has a very long history, and this history is without any break. It's a long, continuous history that makes it very uh, uh, different and very beautiful part of the city itself. So, from during the Sangam period, these centers were just thriving as the place of residence and also the place of meditation. It was after the 7th century it started having a multiple roles. We can find the lot of sculptures made, lot of bas reliefs, images of Tirthankaras made. So it became a very thriving place of worship also. So back then in the Silapatikaram, in the other literary works I did mention that the Shravakas householders came and worshipped by offering incenses and flowers to the Jain monks. So they were worshipped. So similarly, these kind of sculptures were made and they were worshipped. So it was not just the place of a residence. So over the year, it turned as the space of worship as well, and it became a very thriving religious space because a lot of talks were made, and the religion was reached out from here. So it became a very major center of religious activity and also the center of education. And it was a shelter for the people who came with a lot of physical and mental suffering, and a lot of literary compositions, the literary compilations happened in such ideal locations. So these hills and the sites that we have, the Jain sites, has been a center of so many significant activities. From the 3rd century BC to the 2nd century CE, these are the 14 sites that we have. But the sites that I mentioned in the red, like I have highlighted with the red, we don't have any evidence of it after the 7th century CE. So again, a reminder: the remnants which dates back to the 3rd century BC to the 2nd or 3rd century CE are the stone beds, the drip the feature of drip and the Tamil Brahmi inscription. So we don't get to find any sculptures of Tirthankara or bas-relief images of Tirthankara during this period. So from the 7th century, we get to find the sculpture. So that's the addition, that's the change that happens in the site. So among the 14 sites, the places highlighted in the red doesn't have the continuation from the 7th century. So it doesn't have the continuation means these sites don't have the presence of any sculptures of Tirthankara. The rest other sites we have the beds and also we have the sculptures. So right from the 3rd century till almost 10th or 11th century, the religion was flourishing in those places other than these 7 places. I mean, other than these six places. Now we can get to see few of the sites. So Mangulam, located about 20 kilometer northeast of the Madurai, has a hillock by the name Ovamalai or Kaligumalai. So all these hillocks have their local names. So all of them are addressed by different names, and all these have names which differs from one place to another. And one main thing is the Jain sites are mentioned commonly in this region as Pandavar Padukai, Pancha Pandavar Padukai. So the belief is that the localites believe that the Pandavas, the characters in Mahabharata, traveled all the way from the north till the south and stayed here during their tenure of movement. So that's why these places are associated with the Pandavas from the Mahabharata, but it is not. And they're commonly called Panchavar Padukai. If you go locally, if you visit Madurai and you go to the place, you have to mention it as Panchavar Padukai to the localites, and that's when they'll show you the route. And it was in 1882, the historian by the name Robert Sewell discovered the Tamil Brahmi inscriptions in this place of Mangulam. So this is the very beautiful location of this place, and Mangulam is known for the earliest Tamil Brahmi records. So over here we have 5 natural caverns, and we have more than 12 rock beds in each cave, and the last cave has 34 rocket beds. So that's a really huge count of beds, and it very clearly shows it was a thriving center of Jainism. So in this place we find the spring. The availability of the natural spring is there, and a drip ledge. In the picture you can very clearly see there is a cut in the center. So this is the drip ledge. So it's like an eyebrow. It avoids the, like how an eyebrow avoids the foreign agent entering in the eye. Similarly, the drip ledge avoids the rainwater entering the site. And there is a channel to drain also. And there are 6 inscriptions. So over here, this is one inscription. It's a very major inscription because it gives the name of the Sangam Pandya king, Nedunjalayan. So the only source of knowing about the Sangam period is the Tamil literary works that we have. So this inscription is a very, very, very significant find, which it gives a clear idea that this King Nedunjalayan was not just a fictional person. He was a real king who was an historical character who has contributed to the Tamil polity during the Sangam period. So this is a very clear indication. So among the 6 Tamil Brahmi inscription, 2 inscriptions gives the name of the King Nedunjalayan. So other than the contributions made by Nedunjalayan, we have contributions given by the official of the king by the name Kadalan Valudi, his co-brother Sadaikan, and a member of Vellari Nigama. So Nigama is a trade guild. So this trade guild had a name from, it was in the region Vellaripatti. Vellaripatti is near Madurai again. So there was a trade guild that flourished in that region. So these people have also contributed, done some offerings, done some contribution to the Jain monks who are staying here. And this person from the Vellari Nigama also had the title of Kaviti. Kaviti is a title which is given to the Sangam, given during the Sangam period. So, other than the king, all these people, the official, the co-brother, the person from the trade guild, Vellari Nigama, have also done some donations to this place. And I did mention earlier that in the Tamil Brahmi inscription, you just get to know the name of the person, might be the title they hold, where they come from, and some association with them. So these are the very minimal details that we get here. So this is how the cave looks, and it's the hike to this Mangulam site is little tedious. It's little difficult, despite having a lot of supports of iron railings and some steps cut on the stone surface. All these are done, but still, the reaching the site is little difficult. So this last cave, the cave with 34 rock beds, was excavated during the later period, and when it was excavated, because it was filled with mud and cow dung, all these rock beds were exposed. And then excavation happened here in 2006 and 7, and it was carried out by the State Department of Archaeology. So when this excavation happened, a brick structure was also exposed. So this brick structure is believed to have been a small center of learning. So it was found with having a spacious hall, and made using burnt bricks, and a lot of iron nails were also found, which was used to tighten the groove tiles as a ceiling. So these were also found in the excavation. So Mangalam was a major center of learning, is understood through the evidence that we get. An interesting aspect about this inscription is that, and the reason why it's called the early Tamil Brahmi inscription is that it still has an influence of the Prakrit, because we get to find the words like Salakan, Nasudan, Nigama, Dhammam, all these are not the Tamil words. It has the influence of Prakrit. And also certain letters are found here like Sa, Sri, the, all these we don't have in a Tamil eluthu. All these are the northern letters, like from the Prakrit language. All these terms and all these letters comes from. So because it still has the influence of the Prakrit, it is believed to be the oldest Tamil Brahmi script. I mean Tamil Brahmi inscription that we find here, and that makes this place a very unique one. And we just get to find the beds, the drip ledge, and the very significant Tamil Brahmi inscription giving the name of a Sangam Pandya ruler. So here we don't get to find any sculptures. The next major site is Kilakuilkudi. The picture itself gives you a very clear idea that it's a very lovely location. This is a small hillock, and this hillock constitutes the significant vestiges. And over here is a temple and a lotus pond. So this lotus pond makes this place itself a very, very, very beautiful location. So it has a lot of fishes, and we can find people selling the puffed rices. You can purchase and you can feed the fishes. And this temple is of around 18th century, during the post Nayak period, and this temple is devoted to a local guardian deity. And this hillock has the Jain vestiges. So the Samanar Malay is called the Thiru Uruvagam. So this Thiru Uruvagam is one among the 8 major hills in Perungundram, which we discussed a while ago. So the picture here, this yellow board, is one beautiful aspect that we have over here. So all the Jain sites that we have is indicated with the help of this kind of yellow board. So it gives the name of the place in English and in Tamil, and this shape itself is the outline of the emblem of Jainism. So on this, the yellow color is painted, and these location is mentioned. So this really helps us to identify its location, and the moment you see the board, it gives us a clue that okay, there is a Jain site close by. So this board, we find it everywhere, giving it the direction. And the Kilakuilkudi is located about 12 kilometers west of Madurai, and it's very close to a very popular village called Nangamalai Pudukkottai. And this place itself connects the Madurai and Kerala region, the Cheranadu and the Pandiyanadu. It connects, so it falls on a very major trade route. And this is a very long stretch of hill, and it's categorized, and it's split actually into 2 hillocks. So this place is called Kila Kuilkudi, and we have another site called Mela Kuilkudi. Kila and Mela are opposite words in Tamil. Kila is down and Mela is up. So one on a lower elevation and one on a higher elevation. And both these places have the Jain vestiges. But unfortunately, Mela Kuilkudi, we just had the rock beds, just a natural shelter, but the whole site itself faced severe thunder and a natural calamity, and the site itself is now in ruins. So now the whole place is exposed to the sun. It's not as a shelter how it was. So coming back to Kila Kuilkudi, here we find the evidences dating back from the 2nd century BC to the 12th century CE. So it was a very major site for the religion and it thrived for a longer duration. So it comes under the protection of Archaeological Survey of India. So this place has multiple names. It's called by the localites. It's known among the masses as Samanar or Ammanar Malay. And as I mentioned, comes one. It is one among the 8 major hill lakes. So these 8 hill lakes are considered very sacred spaces for attaining salvation. So that's what is the belief among the Jains over here. Visiting these places helps us in getting liberated, helps us in attaining the salvation, is what the belief is among the Tamil Jains. So Tiruvuruvagam is the name mentioned in the verse, uh, giving the names of all the 8 hills. The Kilakuilkudi hill is mentioned as Tiruvuruvagam, and a 9th century inscription found here mentions this place as Kuyirkudiyana Amrita Parakrama Nallur. Kuyilkudi is the current term that we use, and it was called back then as Kuyirkudi and also addressed as Amrita Parakrama Nallu. So, Amrita Parakraman is the title of the early Pandya ruler Rajasimha. So, this was his title, and since he had an association with this place, his title itself was used to address this locality as Amrita Parakrama Nallur. And also it came under the territorial division of Natrattuppurathu, Madakulaki Natrattuppurathu Kuyilkudi. So this Kuyilkudi is the name of the place which came under the territorial division of Natrattuppuram. Like how in India we have Tamil Nadu, and in Tamil Nadu we have Madurai. So all these are the territorial divisions. So similarly, in the inscriptions of later period and all, most of the Pandya inscriptions, we get to find a place being mentioned along with its divisions, with its territorial boundaries that it had back then. So this falls under the division of Natrattuppuram, and this Natrattuppuram comes under the Madakulaki. So Madakulam is a water body, it's a historic water body that helps in the irrigation of the entire city. So it's the name. So it comes under the water body of Madakulam, under the irrigation of Madakulam itself. So that becomes one term of identifying the locality. So the early evidence that we find here is a small boulder with a Tamil Brahmi inscription. It's located on the western corner, and this is locally addressed as Adu Urichan Pare. And here we find few smoothly chiseled rock beds, and you find this dripledge. Very clearly, the dripledge is seen, and here is an estampage of the Tamil Brahmi inscription. So this was found at a later period. Was not. It was found in the 2000 only. This inscription was a later discovery, and also we have few rock paintings over here. It's a 13 lettered single line Tamil Brahmi inscription, and based on the way the letters are engraved, that is based on the paleography, it's dated to 2nd century. So it mentions that the rock bed inside this particular shelter was made by Ulithai of Perindevur. So Ulithai, who hails from the Perindevur, had caused this bed. So these are few picture collage. So this is the temple. So it's just you have to cross the lotus pond, walk through the temple, cross the temple, take these steps, take this route. We have good support of iron railings and few steps cut here and there, and this really helps us to reach the upper reaches of the hill. And it's quite a steep hike, with the proper support of good shoes and good energy, we'll be able to reach the top level of the hill. So once you reach a huge rock piece has all these bas relief sculptures of the Tirthankaras. And just behind this hillock on the other side, we have this huge image of Mahavira. And on the higher elevation, if we hike further, there's a small lamppost. And on the middle reaches, we have this evidence, these foundation remains of a pool that existed here. So coming to this uh, Jain school that was established here, it was done during the reign of Veeranarayanan, Parantaka Veeranarayanan Varagunan, who was a 9th 10th century Pandya ruler. He was married to the Chera princess by the name Vanavan Madevi. So it was after his wife's name, this Jain school was addressed as Madevi Perumpalli. Perum means great and Palli is school. So it was one of the great schools run by the Jains over here, and it was called Madevi after the name of the princess, after the name of the queen. And this particular school had contact with the Mula Sangha, the Shravana Belagola located over there. And we have the Kannada inscription over here next to the lamppost. Uh, I mean, on the rock surface, a seven-lined Kannada inscription mentions the name of six Jain monks who came to the school here. And also in Shravanabelagola, we have an inscription mentioning a monk who from Madurai had gone there, but unfortunately died of a snake bite. And all the monks over there at Shravanabelagola did all the prayers for his soul attaining the liberation. So over here we just have the Kannada inscription, and it very clearly shows the contact that had with the place. So this inscription, and we can find a foundation inscription in the school, and it mentions that the school was established in the 29th regnal year of the particular king Veeranarayanan, and for the maintenance of the school. So nothing would happen simply. If it has to flourish, if it has to happen in a full-fledged way, naturally a lot of support is needed. So along with the political support, a lot of physical support was also rendered by the king. It is the two Veli, which is current equivalent is 13 acres. So Veli, the term Veli is a Tamil unit of measurement, which corresponds to the 13 acres, was donated. And this particular stretch of land is located in Pulingnur. So Pulingnur is identified with current region of Kongar Puliyankulam, which is located close to the Kamaraj University that we have. So around this university, we have all the hillocks has these Jain sites. So like how it flourished, the education flourished in these centers of Jainism. Similarly, in the middle of it, we have a university over here, which is a very popular university that we have. So for the maintenance, these donation was made, and the inscription is engraved here on the foundation. So these loose images, which was found next to the, the Perumpalli, these was brought down and placed in the temple, and now it's placed inside the temple and it's under the worship. So this yaksha, it's actually the image related to the Jains is identified with Ugra Pandian, a Pandya king, but it's actually the image of a yaksha. And this is another loose image of the Tirthankara. It's all placed inside the temple, but under the worship, using in the name of the local gods in Tamil region. So I did mention after the hike, we would reach a huge stretch of rock, and over here we have 8 sculptures in a row being carved. So these 8 sculptures are of the very first sculpture is of Bahubali. So Bahubali was a great ruler. So over the years, he engaged in meditation. He was standing in this constant pose in Kayotha Sarga, and since he was meditating, all the creepers grew around him. On his either side are his sisters Brahmi and Sundari, who have come there with the message of their father. So this is Bahubali. His images are also found prevalent in Madurai. And next is the sculpture of Parshavanatha, a barley sculpture of Parshavanatha, who's standing under the snake hood. So I'll tell you the narration that goes behind him in other sculpture, because we get to find a much more better view of the sculpture. So again, here is Parshavanatha, and then we have the Tirthankaras, Mahavira, and again the Parshavanatha. So we have 8 sculptures, and all these sculptures have a Vattalith inscription. So these sculpture goes back to the 8th or 9th century. So over here, totally one image of Bahubali, 4 Parshavanatha, and 3 Tirthankaras are found. And the beauty is it's placed within an ornamental arch, like how we find the idols of gods and goddesses in the Brahmanic tradition placed within a Prabhavali or a ornamental art. Similarly, all these sculptures are carved, and it shows a connection with the Pandya art and architecture tradition. So, in the second image and the third image, we can find small holes. So, these are an intentional holes being made so that some support is provided, and top of it a small thatch is made to prevent the image from exposing to rains. So to provide a small shelter to this whole image, it's done. And next to it is the inscriptions in Vattelithu giving the details of the donors. So mostly these images were made by the residents, by the students who were studying in the Jain school, and these were made for the purpose of their worship. One interesting thing is this last sculpture of Parshavanatha was made by the mother of Archanandi. I mentioned he was a Jain monk who traveled towards the length and breadth of the state in promoting the religion, in re-establishing the religion, in rejuvenating Jainism. So his mother Gunamati made these particular sculpture. And here we have made by all the resident monks who are here. And this particular location is called Pechi Pallam. Pallam means a small depression, a small undulation. So it's located on a small undulation in the middle of the hillock. So that's the reason. And in front of it is a small natural spring. And behind this particular hillock, we have to take the small route, and it leads to this Seti Podagu. Podagu means a cave. So this image is locally called by the people as Chettiar. A Chettiar is a money lender. So that's what this image is identified with by the localites. So that's why it's called the Seti Podavu. So it's located on the southeastern side, and this huge bas relief is on the frontal side of the cave, and it's about 8 feet, and it's seated on the Simhasana. So you can find the three lions over here, so seated on a Simhasana, and it has the crocodiles on the either side, the Makaras ornating the seating in Artha Paryankasana. So it's not Padmasana, it's Artha Paryankasana with the feet open, and the image of Mahavira has long, elongated ears, and there's a Prabha Mandala. So this halo, the Prabha Mandala has fire flames around it as well. You can find the fire flames very clearly. And there are yakshas flying around. We have the yakshas on the either side having the fly whisk, and he's seated under the triple layered umbrella, showing him winning over the three worlds: the heaven world, the earthy world, and the nether world. So, winning over all the three worlds and attaining the highest knowledge. So, it's the indication of, and that's the reason of showing Mahavira seated under the triple layered umbrella. And on the either side, next to the triple layered umbrella, we have the Chandra and the Surya. So Surya has a lotus and Chandra has a lily, and they are seen celebrating Mahavira. So he is altogether seated under the Ashoka tree. We have the foliages being shown. So under it he is seated, and below it is a 9th century Vattelithu inscription over here, and that was sculpted by a monk by the name Abhinanda Bhattar, and he belonged to the Kurandi school. Kurandi Tirukatampalli. So before mentioning his name, he gives the lineage of the four gurus, four generation of gurus, all the names he mentions, and then he mentions his name, being responsible for sculpting this image. So we get to find the fourth generation of gurus in the Kurandi school of center of education. This is a close-up image. Simhasana, Yakshas, Chandra, Surya seated under the Ashoka tree under the triple layered umbrella. So inside the cave we have this one stretch of sculptures. In the center we have the Titankara showed with the Yakshas seated in Simhasana under a triple layered umbrella. On the right hand side is Yakshi Ambika. So she is one major Jain goddess, Ambika. She is equated to that. And on the other side is another depiction of Yakshi seated on a lion and engaged in a fight with a demon. So she is shown with multiple hands and multiple weapons. So this is Yakshi Ambika. And again, over here, the Vattelithu inscriptions below the images mentions the contributors. And this is the Kannada inscription located in front of the lamppost, which is placed on top of the hill. 7 line Kannada inscription showing the association with the Moola Sangha. So next is Muttupatti, Perumal Malai, and this image I showed it in the front slide. So it's about 15 kilometers from Madurai near the university that we have. Again, it falls on a trade route connecting Madurai and the Pandyanadu and the Cheranadu. And this hillock is known by multiple names like Perumal Malai, Karadipatti Malai. And over here we find the Tamil Brahmi inscription, rocket beds, and we have the loose image of the Tirthankara along with the bas relief images, which is accompanied by the Vattaluthu inscription. So this very clearly shows a continuous existence, thriving of the religion over here. And also a few rock paintings are found, but it's not very clearly seen. One clear depiction rock art images is a standing human. That's the only one very notably seen. Otherwise a lot have gone over the time, and it comes under the protection of ASI. So the Tamil Brahmi inscription goes back to first century BCE, but unfortunately the letters are worn out. A very few letters are visible. So it furnishes the name of different individuals like Andai, Sai, Alan. So Kattan. So these are the names of the individuals who have contributed to this place, and we also get to know the names of places like Nagapirur, which is associated with the Nagamalai. So the previous site located in Nagamalai, Pudukkottai. So the old name of it is Nagapirur, and we have a reference to Musiri. So Musiri is a very famous port city during the time of Cholas. During the period of Cheras belonging to the Sangam period. So we have a reference to the Musiri in the inscription and Vindayur. Vindayur is modern Vandiyur. Scholars have found it to be associated with Vandiyur, and it's located in Madurai, and this other place of Tidiyal, which is Thidiyan, which is located on the Muttupatti and Uslampatti route. So we get to know the old names of all these places and the names of different individuals also. So this is furnished in the Tamil Brahmi inscription and in the Vattaluthu inscription. So Vattaluthu inscription generally comes only with the sculptures, and Tamil Brahmi inscription comes only associated with the rocket beds. So in the Vattaluthu inscription, we get to find the name of um, uh, a student of Mahanandi Periyar, Ashtopavasi Padarar. So Padarar is a common term used for the Jain monks. So this Jain monk is special because he was a Ashtopavasi, the one who eats only once in 8 days. So it's very hard to imagine, but they did follow such principles. There were few who ate only for a week, who ate only for a month, and he was the one who ate only 8 days once. And he comes from the Kurandi school, so that's mentioned here. And the school also had the name of Sri Vallabha Perumpalli. It's named after the another Pandya king Sri Vallabha. So the Kurandi school, the old name of it is Sri Vallabha Perumpalli. So these are the the rocket beds, but unfortunately you can see how much of vandalism it has undergone over the period of time. So this is a very major threat that all these sites face. It's because all these places are located in an open area. It's accessible by all. You just need to have the energy to climb, and then you can access this place. It's not like properly protected with a grill or a door or locks. It's not never under a lock and key. So that's a very big threat to these particular sites, and people do not know the value of it. They just come, sit here, engage in gambling, engage in drinking, and these places have turned out to be spots for antisocial elements. And that's the reason, coming to these sites, sometimes people have a small fear because like how the place will be, how who will be there, and it's quite away from the city as well. But nowadays we have a little bit of securities employed close to that particular locality, and these have come under the protection of state archaeology. So some support and help has been made to reach these sites, and now through these lectures or through the knowledge, through different channels, the knowledge is spread and people are getting to know the significance of these places. So that has reduced the vandalism to some extent. This is the loose image, and these are the images of the Tirthankaras found on the rock surface. And we have the Vattaluthu inscription below it mentioning the donors. Another place is Kongarpulliyankulam, which is located very close to the university, about 16 kilometers west of the Madurai. And we have a very spacious natural cave. Almost 60 rocket beds are found, very neatly chiseled and neatly carved. And there is a presence of a natural spring. And we have Tamil Brahmi inscriptions. So in this inscription, we get to find a name of common name that flourished during the Sangam age called Pittan, and we get to find the donation made by the teacher who is addressed as Upasan. And Upasan is the term for the teacher himself. So we get to find that the donations over here were made by the teachers and made by the nobles. And the Tamil Brahmi inscription over here stands out from the rest because a donation of gold was made for the cutting of these cave shelter. So that's a unique contribution made to this particular place. Like how for the school in Kudi for the maintenance, uh, the land was donated. Similarly, for the cutting of this cave shelter, gold was donated, and these are known by the terms pon, weapon, own. So even today, the term pon is used for the gold in Tamil language, and along with it, some symbols are also shown indicating gold. And there's a reference to a place called Paganur, which is identified with the modern Cholavandan, which is close to Madurai and just behind the hill as well. And there is an image, a sculpture made in the 9th, 10th century, which has a Vattaluthu inscription close to it, and it mentions the work of Achananthi. So that particular image, which is not fully completed, it's little defaced, and this sculpture, this image was made by Achanandi in the 9th, 10th century. So again, from the 2nd century till almost 10th or 11th century, the religion flourished here, and it comes under the protection of state archaeology. This is the site. You have proper iron steps being made. This ladder is there. We have to walk through this thorny bushes, climb here, and this middle space is the location of the natural cave. We have these uh, properly chiseled rock beds inside, and these are the Tamil Brahmi inscriptions that's found here. So this is the symbol I mentioned. The inscription in the middle, at the end, at the right extreme end, are some of the symbols used to denote the gold. And even below, it's like a small box made with a cross in the middle. So this is the bas-relief image of a Tirthankara made by Achanandi, the monk of a later period, and these small holes, as I mentioned, were carved for supporting some thatch. And the other place, Tirupparangundram, this is the first among the in Perangundram. In the verse, this particular place comes the first, and it's called the Parankundram. It's located 8 kilometers south of Madurai, and this place is glorified right from the Sangam period till the later period Bhakti literature. A lot of works describe this place, and it's a center for religious pluralism because we have Jainism, Shaivism, Islam flourishing even till today, and all these vestiges are found concentrated in this hillock. So this cave, housing the Tamil Brahmi inscription, is reached through a bit of climb, and with a lot of support, one can reach here. And we have three inscriptions which goes back to the 1st century. And as usual, we get to find the names of a lot of places like Erikatur. So Erikatur is one. Elam. Elam is modern Sri Lanka. So probably a donor coming all the way from Sri Lanka has helped in creating a little bit of comfort for the Jain monks who stayed here. And we get to know that Kudumbigan is a term used for the householder. So a householder has contributed, and a person with the title Marayam has also helped in making the chiseled rock beds. And we get to find the name of an individual like Anduvan. So all these are found in the inscription. So this is how we can go, and these are the beds with small elevation serving as pillows. And this is a Tamil Brahmi inscription. The interesting part of the inscription is it has reference to the Sri Lanka mentioned as Elam. So one more location on top of the hill, we have a small temple called Kasi Vishwanatha Temple, and this temple is of later period, about Nayak or post Nayak period. Close to that is the small spring, and here highlighted in white is a Tamil Brahmi inscription, and this was also found later. It goes back to the first century CE. It mentions Munagara Musagati. So it mentions the name of an individual who has contributed to this place. And above this small water body, we see on the top we have these. These Jain sculptures comes on top of the water body. It's again Bahubali and again a Parshavanatha images, which is about 10 feet above the rock surface. Yeah, this particular Jain sculptures we get to find in one particular location called the Palani Andavar temple. It's one more temple for Muruga. So over here we have the temple for Skanda or the Murugar. So Murugar is a Tamil god of war. So he is very prominently worshipped god in Tamil Nadu. So we have one among the six major temples. Tirupparangundram comes in that, and we also have Palamudir Chole. So we have two among the six major temples devoted for Muruga. So Tirupparangundram is known for this temple devoted to Muruga. And the speciality of this temple is that it's a rocket temple which has been expanded over the years, and a lot of architecture, a lot of contributions have been made to the temple, and it has expanded over the years. There are five shrines in the temple, one for Ganesha, one for Muruga, one for Vishnu, one for Shiva, and one for Durga. So it has five shrines in it and goes back to 8th or 9th century. So there's one more temple for Muruga, one small temple which is of later period. So behind the temple on this rock boulder we have these sculptures carved, which goes back to 9th century, and again we have Vattaluthu inscription. So over here, this is a Tirthankara, as usual, flanked by the Yakshas, and on top we have the Surya and Chandra. We have one, the sculpture of Mahavira, and next to it is Parshavanatha. So this is a small narrative panel. So Parshavanatha is seen meditating, and it is the he stands below the snake. A snake hood always supports him, and this actually is his yaksha, Dharmendra. So Dharmendra takes the form of a snake and protects him from this particular demon commandant who tries to disturb him while engaged in meditation. So he tries to put a rock on top of him and disturb him, but his yaksha Dharmendra, as a snake in the form of a snake, protects him. And here is his wife, who is the Yakshini of Parshavanatha, Padmavati, protects her husband by holding the Vajra umbrella. Is holding the umbrella on top of the snake hood. So we can find the Yakshini, and that is Dharmendra, the Yaksha. And after realizing his power, the demon commandant surrenders to him. So this narrative, in such a narrative way, we always find the Parshavanatha depicted here, along with Yaksha, Yakshini, and the demon. So behind the temple, just exactly behind the temple, Tirupparangundram is Ten Parangundram. So Ten is the southern side. So behind this is an Umayandavar Koil. So this is a small rocket temple again. It was initially a Jain site because we had the remnants of a Tirthankara image here, which was brought down because we still have the depiction of the foliages on the top. In this particular image, you can find on the extreme right the picture that I placed. The Tirthankara image was brought down, and an image of Ardhanarishwara was sculpted. So this happened around the 10th or 11th century, and it is totally converted to a Shaiva spot. And we have this the moment you enter inside this place, this image of Nataraja with Muruga, and outside we have the few Nayanmars, And this whole transition happened under during the time of a Pandya ruler with the help of Prasanna Devar. So this happened during the Sundara Pandian during the rule of Sundara Pandian. That's why this place is also called as Sundara Pandiya Ishvara Mudayar Kovil. So this is the temple, and at the top we have a mosque for Shikandar Shah, Madurai Sultanate ruler. So that's why this hill is also called as Shikandar Malai. Another place is Varichur Kunnatur, which is about 15 kilometers, falls on Madurai Shivagangai Road. And this hillock is called the Udayagiri Hill or Subramanya Hill. So on one side of the hill we have a rocket temple, and on the other side also we have one. Close to this Udayagirishwara temple, we have this Jain cave, and we have numerous rock beds and a drip ledge. And the inscription here goes back to 2nd century BC, but unfortunately, the Tamil Brahmi inscriptions are not very clearly seen. It's almost gone. But when the time the estampage was taken, when a study was made, when few letters were visible, it very clearly gives the detail of a donation of 100 kalam paddy. So, Noor kalam nel. Kalam is again a unit of measurement, and paddy, for paddy, the word of nel is mentioned. Even today in Tamil, for referring to paddy, we use the word nel. So this inscription is again unique because it speaks about a donation of 100 units of paddy for the upkeep of the place and for the monks who were here. Similar to the inscription we saw earlier, which speaks about a donation of gold. So over here we have donation of paddy. So on one side we have this temple called Udayagirishwara because the rays of the rising sun falls here, and the rays of the setting sun falls on the other side, the Ashtagirishwara. So this second picture is of Ashtagirishwara. So one thing what we get to find in all these places having the Jain sites is it's around the 8th century BC, 8th century CE, we get to find a lot of rocket temples coming up. So next to the Jain site itself, we have these temples for Shiva coming up. A very simple. These are the elementary form of the temple architecture. So we get to find the temples for them. So this is one a significant transition that happens. Haritapati is a very popular site, and this place was coming in the news a few years back because the Union government was trying to extract tungsten mineral from this place. If at all the project would have been approved, the entire site with the vestiges, with this rich history, would have completely been demolished. But due to the efforts of the villagers who protested day and night, voicing out their concern and staying against this particular initiative, we were able to win, and now this place is again thriving in its stone glory, and this whole project of the Union government has been stopped, and now it is standing as usual, or else this whole place would have been lost, and now we would have just been talking about it. If at all you come to Madurai and if you had to visit Artapati, you wouldn't be seeing any of this. But now, because of the people, localites, and their effort, we have it existing. It's located on the Melur and Madurai highway, and this hillock is called the Kalingamalai. So over here, this site comes under the protection of state archaeology. So long before when I went to this place, it did not have any of this fence or a board or any protection. Even a lamp post is there. These were not there around 5 to 6 years before when I went. But now all these facilities are made, and it is under proper lock and key, and we have a security. So when we want to go to the site, we have to call the security, get a permission, and then we can visit it. So it's a good effort that's been made from the side of the state archaeology. So as usual, I mentioned all these Jain beds are called as the Panchavar Padike. We have a drip ledge here, but the rock beds are absent here. When a small excavation was done, this particular piece of rock came out, and we get to find that the existence of beds were there, but this is the only remain. So these goes back to the 2nd century BC. Based on the paleography, we get to find, and here we can identify that the donation of the cave. The cave is mentioned in Tamil as Mulagai. Over here, that's a term used by Silivan, a person, from Nelveli. So Nelveli is the name of a current city called Tirunelveli. So person coming all the way from Tirunelveli with the name Silivan Adinan has cut the cave, has donated the cave, has contributed to this cave. And another inscription mentions the son of Ilam Peradan, Himayavan, he comes from the Ilanji. So even today we have this place near Tenkasi, another city in the Tamil Nadu, by the name Ilanji. It still continues in the same name, came here and contributed to the shelter. So this is the only remnants of the rock cut bed that we find here. The rest of the place has just mere mud. So next to it is this small Titankara image, barley sculpture carved, and we can find the faint remains of paintings on top of it with bright colors like orange, green are found, and below it is Vattaluthu inscription, and this dates back to 10th century. And this inscription is really important that it mentions the early name of this hill, which is currently called Kalinga Malai, it was addressed in inscription as Tirupinayan Malai. So this it's located in Padirikudi. So probably Padirikudi is the old name of Arattapatti. So scholars also believe that this place Arattapatti is named after the Jain monk Arittaneni. So Jain Tirthankara Arishtaneni. So it's related to Jain, and and this sculpture was again sculpted by Achanandi, and it very clearly mentions that the people of people of this Padirikudi were the protectors of the sculpture. And to the words that's carved in the inscription, till today the people have stood, fought against it, and protected the site. And also, this Arattapatti is declared as the first biodiversity site in Tamil Nadu because it has numerous water bodies and lot of flora and fauna. It has rich and very distinct flora and fauna concentrations here. So it's the very first biodiversity site declared by the state government. So this is the Rocket Temple that's on the other side of the hill. And this Rocket Temple is unique because of the presence of this sculpture on the left hand side. It's one of the manifestation of Shiva called the Lapulisa. So it's very, very rare to be found in Tamil Nadu, and we have it here. It goes back to the 8th century. Yet another place is Alagar Malai. So it also comes under the 8 major hills sacred to Hinduism, sacred to Jainism, sorry. It's located about 25 kilometers north of Madurai, and it falls on the trade route connecting the Pandya and Chola region. We get to find a lot of prehistoric rock art. Um, Numerous themes have been highlighted in this rock art. So it needs a lot of climb. So through the climb we can reach here, and as usual we have the remains right from the 2nd century BC with spring, drip ledge, rocket channel, and almost 12 inscriptions are here. And the very significant aspect of this inscription, Tamil Brahmi inscription, is that it gives the old name of the city of Madurai called the Madurai. So that's the old name of Madurai. So around 2500 years before, the city was known by the name Madurai, which over the year came to be called as Madurai. And also it mentions a lot of merchants like salt merchant, goldsmith, iron merchant, sugar trader coming all the way from Madurai and contributing to this place. So that's a very significant thing. And also name of a Jain nun by the name Sapamiti Pamiti is also mentioned in the Tamil Brahmi inscription. And this is like really significant. And one small image of the Tankara is found. Again, it's a work of Achanandi. Goes back to 7th century, and the small Vattaluthu inscription close by. And the Alagar Malai, which is mentioned as Irungundram in the 8 major hills. It's called an Irungundram because Irund in Tamil means dark and Kundra means hill. It's a dark hill because it has a very thick concentration of forest. So it is actually a reserve forest. So that's the reason it's called an Irungundram. And it is also one of the sacred hills, one among the 8 major sacred hills for Jainism. And we have a temple for Vishnu, and again we have a temple for Muruga here. Keelabalavu is a site located about 38 kilometers from Madurai, which comes under the protection of ASI. Is also falls under the trade route, and we again have the remnants from the 2nd century till the 12th century. We have the rocket beds, and the drip ledge. And over here, the inscription one detail is significant. Upasakan 11 from Tondi. Tondi is a very major locality. From there, he has come here and got the beds cut. And Jain householder also contributed. And one person who is engaged in religious activity is also has also contributed. So we can find the contribution coming from all the corners of the profession, be it a teacher, be it a normal person, be it a merchant, be it an official, be it a king. So that's what is a very significant aspect. All of them from different walks of life had contributed and helped in the comfort of Jain monks, have also contributed for the flourishment of the religion. So this kind of a support was made in the later period, and this is a lovely view that we can get from here. And on the other side, and on the frontal side of the hill, we can find these images of the Tirthankaras carved of 8th or 9th century with a Vattaluthu inscription. And on the other side, we have these many sculptures, and we can find the remnants of painting as well. It shows very clearly that this would have been a very major center of worship. So that's why the images are carved. And over here in the center, the Tirthankara is accompanied by the lamp, by two lamps. So we have a depiction of the lamps, and even today we have this kind of vilak. Vilak is a lamp, and these kind of lamps are called as kuttu vilak. Till today, lamps similar to this are made, and on his either side we have the fly whisk. So these are just shown as an object. And over here, we get to find that the Vattaluthu inscription mentions that a certain amount of rice was given here as an offering, and about 50 sheep were also offered for burning the perpetual lamp. So the ghee was extracted from the milk, and then the lamps were burnt using that. So we can find the remains of painting, and on the second image, we can find just the lime plaster. So first, the lime plaster was made, and on top of it, the paintings were done. And these holes are used for grinding the medicine. So we get to find it in the Keelavalava site. Anemalai is very major site. Over here we again have the temple for one of the manifestation of Vishnu, and also we have lot of Jain remains. So it's located 8 kilometers north of Madurai, and the moment you enter Madurai through the northern side, this view you can see, and it looks like an elephant which is reclining. So that's why it's called the Yane Malai. Yane in Tamil means an elephant shaped image, and it also comes under the 8 sacred hills for the Jains. It's called Ane Malai itself. So we get to find the Tamil Brahmi inscription. Again, we have these properly chiseled beds, and the inscription goes back to the 1st century. And then there's one place which leads to the galaxy of sculptures. So over here we have the Tirthankara, the Parshavanatha, Mahavira, and Yakshi Ambika. Over here very clearly we get to find the image with the painting. So it's only here a little bit more of the color is seen. So again, the Vattaluthu inscription here very clearly mentions about the name of the donors, the Nadu, the place where they come from, the locality where they come from. All these are also attested along with the name, and it's very clearly known that a lot of officials have contributed, nobles have contributed, and the individuals, all of them have patronized the religion. And with the help of these sculptures, they have helped in the flourishment of the religion as well. And one more interesting aspect is that one of the Vattaluthu inscription mentions that a Brahmin Sabha of Narasingha Mangalam, a Brahmin Sabha, has helped in the maintenance of this particular Jain images. So it comes under the protection of a Brahmin Sabha. So it very clearly highlights how both the religious sects lived in correlation also. So this is one evidence for that. Without any dispute, the religion flourished here. And in the streets we get to find there's a small temple being made, and there's one loose image of a Tirthankara which is placed inside the temple, and it's worshipped as a Muniyandi. It's a local deity, it's a local guardian deity. So the whole Tirthankara image is modified a little and it's been brought into the Brahmanical main fold. And this is again rocket temple going back to the 8th century, but over the year a lot of additions are made and it's turned into a very huge and beautiful temple, and it's for Lord Narasimha. And just close to the temple we have one more rocket temple, but unfortunately it's not under worship, and this is for Lord Muruga, but the one for Narasimha is under the worship. So Vikramangalam, so this was a site place which I worked for my dissertation and masters, and I worked on the archaeological vestiges in the Vikramangalam region. So this hillock that we have is called Undankallu, and this is the view that we get to find when we climb the hill. Again, Vikramangalam falls on the trade route connecting the Pandya and the Cheranadu. So there's one small hole. It's called Raki Podavu. Over there, we have a very few rock pits with the inscription. And then again, we have this one site. We have to hike a little, and we can reach here. So it's again a natural cave with 11 rock pits, and the inscription here goes back to the 2nd century. It gives the names of the individuals who have cut the bed. It's found on the pillow region of the stone beds. These kind of label inscriptions are found, and now today we visit the Vikramangalam, a lot of changes are done. So this particular inscription is protected, and there's iron railings are put. It comes under the lock and key, and for climbing this side, when I went during the time of my dissertation, there was no proper a route or steps were carved, but now while climbing, proper steps and proper path is paved, and it has made the climbing more easy. These are the beds. This is how it looks, and this is a Tamil Brahmi inscription. And over here on the pillow region, also few names are mentioned. And again, some act of vandalism. So that's a very major threat for the Jain sites that we have here. So even today, we have few temples for Tirthankaras in the city of Madurai, in the heart of the city, that located very close to the temple. So this is one such temple made using the marble and also with the help of the marble tiles. So, as my friend Ocean gave an introduction to me, I engage in creating heritage based experiential learning for school children because I very strongly believe that the real education starts outside the textbook learning. So, I've taken them to the Varichiyur Kunnatur, the site. I take them there, I make them sit there, experience the place, give the historical and archaeological significance of the place, and I took them to the Thiruparangundram, showed the images, showed the sculptures, and spoke to them about the sculptures and the depiction. And this is the Kila Kuilkudi site we have gone, and this was once when we visited Aritapatti. So it's definitely a significant aspect to be reached among the younger generation. And the city of Madurai is very elaborately blessed with a lot of Jain vestiges, and definitely it's one of the place to be visited by all and to be experienced. And I thank you all for participating in the lecture and listening to me patiently, and thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Deepika, for a wonderful session. You took a very detailed overview of everything and anything that we have to know about Jainism in Madurai. In fact, not just the archaeological material, you also referred to multiple textual references where we can see more and more details of the Jain monks and nuns who were staying in the region in and around Madurai. We are very thankful to you and hope that someday many more lectures on this particular topic would come from your part. Thank you very
Sure,
much.
sure. Thank you.